March 7th, and this at 5:34. We're just beginning the Policy Committee meeting of the whole after a short delay for technical issues. I'd like to start off the meeting with a motion to accept the agenda. To approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
So it was moved by President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Adams.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Charisma, are we doing all voice vote or are we doing electronic voting?
All voice vote. I can put it in manually after. Well, during as you go along.
Very good. Okay. All right. With the agenda approved, we have no speakers. So that takes us right into item 3, standing agenda items.
Commissioner Powell,
Yes, ma'am.
I think didn't we just vote on the minutes? Or did we
No,
vote
no.
on the agenda? Because the next one is the minutes to approve.
Yes,
So-
in my committee, I asked for approval of the agenda.
Okay.
Which is, now 3A is the minutes from February 7th.
All right, thank you. So
Would you-
moved,
Second.
Are you moving?
seconded by, approved by President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No
Okay,
opposed.
motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Charisma, the floor is yours to walk us through 3B, a review of, I'm sorry, there are no updates. Is that correct, Charisma?
Correct. There's no NESBA updates, but if you want, I can talk about the Code of Conduct Committee.
Yes, please.
So just as an update to commissioners and to the public, the Code of Conduct Committee had its last meeting last week. And so we're now moving to the next stage in the process, which means that it will be going to the Policy Subcommittee with Commissioner Powell as chair. And Executive Cabinet and some other folks have been invited, as well as some Code of Conduct Committee members to start that process. And so we will keep you updated on next steps after it leaves Policy Subcommittee.
Yeah, Commissioner Powell, I'd like to just thank that committee for doing that hard work, and we'll be thanking them again. But this code of conduct was not an easy endeavor, and so to have folk from the community to be consistent, and to be engaged in it is to be commended. And so I just wanted to insert that here, but we'll be, offering our congratulations in the future. Thank you.
I appreciate your remarks, President Elliott. The Code of Conduct Committee is a committee that requires some endurance because it's always meeting. There's, it's a long, arduous process to review the Code of Conduct annually. And then you get to start all over again. So thank you for the update, Charisma, and your comments, President Elliott. The next item on the agenda, under item 4A, is the fund balance policy. I think that Sean Farr has a presentation for us. Is that right, Charisma?
Yes, he's approaching the podium now.
Thank you.
There we go. All right. So every year, we're going to review the fund balance policy of the board. And just to, especially for the people viewing, what is fund balance? Fund balance is your assets, which in our case is primarily cash and receivables, money that people owe us, less your liabilities, what we owe other people. The net of that is fund balance. And for us, at June 30th, 2022, it was $169 million. which is fairly high amount. So the purpose of the policy is to define, provide some definitions underneath the category of fund balance. There's kind of subcategories. And then what do you do with that? How do you access that? What kind of controls that you have in place on it? So if you go through the policy and you get into definitions, you'll start seeing these things that we're trying to define. The first one being non-spendable. So again, we're going to take fund balance and you're going to break it down into and these are accounting industry standards. So these are terms that are used in every governmental organization. So for us, non-spendable is primarily prepayments. So as of June 30th, 22, that's where this snapshot occurs, our financial statements. We had about $17 million, which primarily was charter school payments. And so you take your fund balance, but you have to start kind of setting aside things that you can't access. So that's why it's called non-spendable, because it's basically already been spent, but it's sitting there until we got to July 1 of this year, and then it gets expensed. This is kind of accounting nuances. The next category is called restricted. So restricted is debt service, primarily for us, and that is setting aside our debt service payment that we owe, which was $14 million as of last June 30th. So you take those and you subtract that from the total, which our fund balance was $169 million, and then you come down to what you would call unrestricted categories. And then you start going into those subcategories in this policy, which is then committed. So commitments are kind of a higher level thing. These are things that the board controls now, but there's a distinguishment between a term called committed and assigned. So committed are things that we recognize that we have potential liabilities, and we set aside money for that. So one of them is, a big one is post-employment benefits. Another is workers' comp, and then health insurance. So those amounts are set aside. We, as of last year, we had set aside $38 million for committed items. And you go to the next page, and you'll get, yeah, there you go. You'll see the term assigned. So assigned now is where the board is recognizing potential things or wanting to set aside money for things that could go wrong or things that we might need money for. And there's a number of categories that have been set aside by the board that's in the audit. But you start to recognize, well, what happens if our revenue estimates are short? And we got to set aside some money in case, in the case of, we had set aside in this year's budget $10 million of appropriated fund balance. But as of last June 30th, that was last fiscal year, so we recognize that we've carved out $10 million that would be set aside in this fiscal year. So so you're getting into these kind of more nuanced definitions, but it's going through those, and so we're defining those. And then after all that, what's left, after all these categories, non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, you get to unassigned. And unassigned is basically what's left and what is available if the board needed to access resources for a purpose that otherwise wasn't already previously identified. And for us, as of last June 30th, that was $52 million. So now you've got down to unassigned, and now you go in to say, okay, well, what should be the minimum we should carry? What should be the maximum? You're starting to try to define, this is in Section 3 guidelines, you try to define a range, and that range can vary. What the district previously had set up was a minimum of 5% of expenditures from last year, or a maximum of 15%. So that's just the board establishing a range, and we'll be reviewing this policy each year, so the board could change that range. But to give you an idea of what that range represented, 5% on our expenditures last year would have been 38 million. So minimum 38, 15% is 114 million. So that's a maximum. We came in at 52 million, that's 6.9%. So we're within that range. Now, and one significant thing here is we're calculating off of unassigned. There's a reference that was in the previous policy about the Government Financial Officers Association, and they have kind of recommendations, and they base their recommendations on the unrestricted number, unassigned and assigned. We're looking at the unassigned as being more specific to our situation here, so we're calculating off that number. So you go down to 3.4, and now you're starting to add language to say, okay, well, what are the parameters? What does the board do to approve this? And you start getting into some specific language. And then we go to the next page. 3.5 and 3.6 is actually adding some more detailed definition to what I was just describing. 3.5 is committed and assigned. 3.6 is restricted, and gives some kind of categories or idea or kind of flesh out for somebody looking at the policy. Well, what does that mean, right? So that is actually new language that is being added this year to deal with trying to provide more depth into the policy so people could get more understanding. Questions?
So I'm thinking that with the, influx of cash in this case, should there be, and you can help me with this, Sean, should there be some language in the policy that speaks to if we have additional funding, additional cash, that may be an opportunity for us to pay down our debt? Or is there some formula whereby that would not be something that we would do? But I'm thinking that, we've got some long-term debt out there, and should we have in policy something that references, if we're in this position that we can pay down our debt, long-term debt?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you could. What we've got is language here that kind of generally says the board can, take actions. That would be an action. I don't know. I mean, you could put it in the policy, but maybe just beyond that, you could, if you wanted to, you could have examples of things that you might do with it. And that's a good point. And we're actually, I've been working with my staff. We're kind of looking at that as we go through this fiscal year and next fiscal year. We expect to have significant operating surpluses that will cause the fund balance to raise even higher. And a bulk of that, not all of it, because some of it is carved up into non-spendable, but a bulk of it is represented in cash. And that's, so then you've got this cash, and you say, well, maybe we should, maybe that's what a business would do, would look and say, well, maybe we should pay down debt, or if you're a corporation, you might buy back stock. But we could provide some examples if the board was comfortable with that. It wouldn't, you could provide examples, it wouldn't restrict the board, but it could flesh out to say, okay, well, what might you do with this, with the money?
Yeah, because if we're looking at the solvency of this district for the future, and I know that Dr. Jallo, as state monitor, is directing us to do a 5-year financial plan, then this is probably something that we should consider. And if, some of the numbers in terms of academic student enrollment may be vulnerable to us, I'll just put it that way, then we may want to think about having some language in the policy that speaks to paying down our debt. And I don't know how much debt we have out there, but if we've got this influx of cash, we may want to look at doing that. And so, Commissioner Powell, I don't know, what language we would consider, and I will just open it up, because this is just my thought about it. It may not be the thought of the board, but if there could be some language in the policy that speaks to, if we have this amount of cash, that we can use it by reducing some of the long-term debt.
So Commissioner Elliott, let me speak directly to your point. Mr. Farr told us that what we have in unrestricted currently is about 6.5% of our prior year's operating expenses. He didn't indicate how much more we could expect it to grow next year, but there is specific language, and Mr. Farr, perhaps you could highlight it for those who are present, about the mechanics of what to do if that the upper limit, the 15%, should be exceeded. I think the language revolves around one-time expenditures. Is that right, Mr. Farr?
Yeah.
So why don't we move through that and see if that doesn't satisfy some of your questions, Commissioner Elliott? With
Where are we
reference
going?
to, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, I was just asking what's the direction of this?
I'm returning the floor over to Mr. Farr to describe the mechanics of what to do when we exceed the 15%.
Yeah, and I'm looking for that right now.
3.4. I'm not.
Yeah.
Are we asking for this to be approved this evening, Commissioner? Or is this just a review of the policy?
And we are asking for it to be approved out of committee. Again, the language in the policy is that should the upper limit of our unrestricted be reached, the administration should then propose one-time uses for anything that goes over that 15%. In other words, should that condition exist, we need to be engaged. We need to be begin a debate over what's the best way to use that. Is the best thing to do to keep it in reserve because next year is going to be rough? Or is the best thing to do to pay down debt? Or is the best thing to do to, for instance, at the time that Dr. Jallo came in, there's discussion about a one-time expenditure for upgrading our software, our accounting software. So, which had been put off because there wasn't enough money to go around, right? So, my recommendation, Commissioner Elliott, is that we allow the language of the policy to bring us to that point when and if we hit those circumstances, rather than try to discuss like a priority list of what we should be doing should that happen. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, Mr. Farr has a comment.
Yeah. So the section Commissioner Powell is referring to is 3.3, unassigned funds. Should unassigned fund balance of the fund ever exceed the maximum 15% range, the district may consider such fund balance surpluses for one-time expenditures that are non-recurring in nature and which will not require additional future expense outlays for maintenance, additional staffing, or other recurring expenditures. The board should also consider the virtues of increasing allocations to restricted, committed, and assigned funds rather than spending down the unassigned fund balance. So it provides a direction for that without specifying the specifics of what that might be.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. But I guess because we do have this long-term debt, that's something that should, in my view, be a priority. You know, we tend to look at, you know, other things that we have to spend on, not just saying those things are not important, but, you know, I think that given the unknown of our financial position in the future, it just seems to me that there should be some specificity to it now. I'm not saying we do it tonight, because I'm just thinking of this tonight. But I am saying, I am putting on the table that we have to look at this long-term debt that we have, and we have to take care of it, you know. And, you know, how we do that in the future. Now, what that could mean in the future is that this board may decide, you know, I may put up a resolution if we have, you know, some additional funding that we want the debt paid. You know, that may be an option that we may be able to do. So, but I just want the administration to keep in mind that we need to be reducing, from my perspective, unless there's some reason to keep debt, you know, some good reason, that we need to be reducing as much as we can.
And I just, you know, CFO Farr and I have had that discussion, right? You know, in terms of, you know, what's the amount of debt that we pay off now, what we can, what keeps us fiscally safe and healthy. So those conversations are ongoing. I think we have to have that as a board. I think as we approach the next 2 years and what we get in terms of return from ARP and, you know, what goes into our fund balance, we could really take a good look and see what puts us in a healthy position. I want to be, you know, that's what we talked about in fund balance in our February 14th meeting, was about making sure that we're using fund balance for non-reoccurring expenses, right? And that's what we have to train ourselves as a district to do, because in the past, what got us in trouble was using $35 million for teaching staff and not you know, and then we do that for 4 or 5 years, we just ate up $160 million of fund balance. That brings us to, you know, when we get into those difficult conversations about, you know, when we get into staffing moving forward and what it looks like and where reductions have to happen, we can't go back to say, hey, use the fund balance to carry that. It's more about those non-recurring costs.
Yeah, I would add that, so one thing is we're going to review this policy every year, right? So that's actually built in at the end of the policy. So after another year of operation, we're expecting to have a substantial operating surplus from this year, primarily from the impact of federal stimulus dollars on our budget, positive impact. And so as that number builds, and Superintendent Peloso is correct, we have had that conversation, and we were considering that, looking at it, and decided to hold off. But because I think we're gonna build out of this year, and we expect to build out of 23, 24. That's the last year of the federal stimulus. And then we'll have kind of a new reality of 24, 25. It's probably, we could, and it's certainly up to Commissioner Powell, but we could have this policy in its current state, knowing that we're going to review it every year, and then we can reevaluate basically what our position is, because we expect it to be better financially. Which is good, right? But then it starts to get into, okay, well, should we do certain things? And one of them would be paying down some debt, which is not a bad idea.
Yeah, I think Vice President LeBron has a question. Commissioner Powell.
By all means, thank you.
Yeah, so I have more of a comment versus a question in terms of that's something we can also explore through the Finance Committee in terms of seeing what other school districts do, because I would be curious to see For example, Buffalo, Syracuse, and the Big Fives do, but also even across other school districts across the states, perhaps they might have, and I can send an email out to school board folks just to see what districts they're representing and what they may have language or policy around debt services, and how they reduce their debt footprint, if you will, in the budget. But certainly, I just wanted to put that out there as something that we can then take on as further conversation, and that it doesn't just end here tonight for that,
Sounds good.
exploring further. So I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Malloy has a question. Commissioner Powell?
Thank you. Yeah, just to piggyback on what our president and vice president have said, you know, interested in talking more about this in finance, and I hear what you're saying about debt and wanting to get out of debt. I think the question that I had sort of is, it's a bit redundant, so I apologize, but my fear is, you know, just looking at these numbers, how quickly are we going to deplete this fund once our CURSA and our dollars are gone? I'm already starting to panic just a little bit. And is our fiscal outlook getting pretty precarious? Are we going to be in a deficit very quickly?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm interested in understanding.
So, you know, I had the privilege of going to some lobby days with President Elliott last week, and I think this was some of the conversation we've had around fund balance support and foundation aid, and what is it going to mean when these services that we're providing through ARP are necessary services. I know the federal government said don't put them into people, but truth be told, we needed to put them into people, right? We had teachers going out on COVID leaves. They were out for extended period of time. We needed to invest in subs. We needed to invest in social emotional supports. So that's going to be a conversation as we go through with the state too, is how does foundation aid look now that ARP goes? I do want to, you know, I want to reinforce that our fund balance, we need to be strategic in how we spend that through time. And if we get into the business of using it for people, we're going to head down a path that it will be expended pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too much deeper into the possibilities of what we could spend money on in the future, because we aren't there yet, quite frankly. We're still well within the range of what we should be holding in available cash. And I could spend a few minutes talking about ways that we can be moving even more funds into committed funds, for instance, unemployment insurance, unemployment benefits for when we go off the ARP and CURSA cliff, we're going to be presumptively laying people off, and that means we have to pay unemployment for them because, you know, we're self-insured in that respect. So, and one of the things that shows up in our audit reports every year is our post-employment retirement benefits. We have a small portion set aside in committed funds, but the general accounting rules require that actuaries tell us what they presume to be the lifetime cost of those retirement benefits, and what we put aside barely scratches the surface. So that's something that if you're interested in having that conversation, you might want to bring that up in the audit meeting with our Auditor General, Anissa Wheeler. Are there any other questions? And Mr. Farr, have you finished your presentation?
Yeah, I'm done.
Any other
I don't think
questions?
there are any other questions, Commissioner Powell.
Okay. If there are no questions for Mr. Farr, are there any comments or observations about the policy itself that would preclude us from voting it out of committee? I do want to say that this is one of the very specific policies that Dr. Jallo raised in her recommendations. So this revising the policy, this particular policy is a big deal. And I'm eager to see it move out of committee and into the three-step reading process.
So Commissioner Malloy has a question of Commissioner Powell.
I'm just wondering if Dr. Jallo has any comments that she wanted to make on the policy.
Dr. Jallo?
You cut off, I didn't hear your question, your full question.
Do you have anything to say about the policy?
Not at this point, I think it's ready to go
Okay, thank you.
to the readings, to be honest with you. And then you have an opportunity to address some of the things raised by the president.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Do I have a motion?
So
Second,
it was moved by Commissioner Patterson, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. Oh,
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Charisma, did we have a unanimous vote?
We have a 6-0 vote, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner Simmons is not here today.
I see. All right, very good. That closes that agenda item. The next item on the agenda is, oh, Charisma, you're going to have to help me out here. My app closed.
Is the policy deliverables?
Yeah, you want to carry that one?
Yeah, I can
Wanna-
start the conversation. So at this time, we are nearing the end of the policy manual review. And so attached is the policy deliverables as it is. There are some policies that are still under review, and so the deliverables will be updated if anything changes. And so I know there are some actions that need to be reviewed annually, biannually. There's different requirements and stuff that's happening, and so definitely getting assistance from administration on continuing to get the required reports to the board. Commissioner Powell, I don't know if there was anything else you needed to add. I know Vice President LeBron has her hand raised.
Okay, while we're listening to her, could you project the, or maybe you already have, project the worksheet that you posted to Board Docs up on the screen for the viewing audience?
Yes, and I can scroll through
And go ahead, Commissioner LeBron.
Yes.
had a question?
Yeah, I feel like my mic is, can you hear me, Dejan? Okay. So a couple of things, because when I first saw this, I was like, why is there 8 pages of reports? And honestly, in full transparency, I don't even know how often board members will be reading 8 pages worth of reports. Some of these pages have even up to 2, 4, 6, 8 reports on a page times 8 pages. Which I think is 64 reports. We're not going to be reading 64 reports, but I would, however, and I'm just speaking from a very realist standpoint and someone who has served here in 6 years and has read through reports. But what I would suggest is if we could actually sort of look at all of these and align policies under committees, so that we know which policies really the reports should be going through and have a greater clarity and understanding. But also, I'm going to ask my board colleagues if we can actually read this report, these deliverables, to see if these are still reports that actually make sense. Because some of these reports that were asked for, I do not think make sense in today's day and time. And if it's not aligning to student outcomes and academic achievement or fiscal implications on the district and the impact of decisions, I personally don't want to be caught up in some of the weeds with some of these reports, and that's just me, and I just want to put that out there. I would much rather that we spend time looking at the reporting requirement, if it makes sense, does it align with those 2 outcome pieces that we should be focused on? And if it doesn't, then perhaps even going back to amend that policy to remove the requirement. Now, I'm not saying remove the policy, I'm just saying the reporting out so that we're not getting inundated with reports. We would be reading ourselves to death and then not focusing on student outcomes whatsoever if we were to just read through 64 reports. Thank you.
I'm glad you spoke to that, Commissioner LeBron. Many of these deliverables have language such as the policy will be reviewed annually or biannually. And we have to decide whether we want to keep, I mean, obviously, we want to be reviewing the whole manual on a regular 2 to 3 year cycle. And those particular mandate to review might not be compatible with a routine 2 to 3 year cycle. So that's something to consider. The other thing is some of those reports could be bundled or could be duplicative with reports that the administration is already delivering to the state. So we need to figure out which ones of those are already being done, and not just for us, but for the state, and label them as such, so that the next iteration of our policy review might point to a specific report that's already being done, and to ensure that the board sees it, that it doesn't just go straight to the state without the board even seeing it, that sort of thing. So that's part of the next step of work, and that's part of the reason why I asked that to be presented to this committee tonight. So you're dead on in your comments, Commissioner LeBron. Any other?
Question, yeah, she has another comment.
Well, actually, Commissioner Powell, I did actually just want to thank you, because sometimes I do feel that when we're having conversations and putting policies and reports embedded in policies, it falls on our staff too to then have to try to track all of these. And this is the first time I've ever seen all of the reports that we have made through requests via policy to kind of force. And I also think in different times it made sense when perhaps the relationship between previous boards and previous administrations wasn't at the best, and felt like it couldn't be trusted in a way to push for them to give us the data. So I just want to thank you and Charisma for highlighting that it is almost 64 reports that we have embedded through policies, because there's a ridiculous amount. And I'm glad to hear that there's already a plan and that this was part of that plan. So thank you for that.
Is there anyone else who would like to be recognized?
No, not at this time.
Okay. All right. The next item on our agenda then is the board meeting survey, and that would close out our meeting, and I'll be able to turn the floor over to our next committee chair. If folks would just take a moment to go through the meeting survey. And I'm trying to find it myself. And I would at this time entertain a motion to adjourn the policy committee.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Commissioner Patterson, the floor is yours.
I'm going to consult with the president to see if she wants to take like a 5-minute break before we begin the audit committee.
I think we can go on.
Go on?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Give us 1 second to switch.
Oh, okay. In that case.
There's still a switcheroo.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Just do a brief interlude so that he can update.
Good evening. I would like to welcome and call the, I would like to call the Audit Committee meeting of the whole to order. Today is Tuesday, March 7th, 2023. My name is James Patterson, and I chair the Audit Committee. This evening, Commissioner Simmons is absent, and Commissioner Powell is on Zoom. Before I begin, I'd like to thank General Counsel, the Auditor General, Anissa Henry Wheeler, for her work that she does on the committee, on the Audit Committee. Oftentimes, she hears our complaints or my complaints, but I think it's respectful that we also thank people for the hard work that they do. So, Anissa, I want to thank you. Item number two, there are no speakers addressing the audit agenda. Moving on to item number three, can I have a motion to accept the minutes for the February 7th Audit Committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Malloy, seconded by Commissioner Adams. All right. Are there any questions or comments? Since there are none, can we have a verbal vote, or are we voting online? Oh. Okay, so we're doing both.
Aye.
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 The ayes have it.
So nothing's come up yet for the vote? No.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
Here it is.
Yeah, hold on, I have to refresh, you want me to do it? No, it refreshed.
Let me know when you're all set, Anissa.
Is Commissioner Powell able to vote online?
Commissioner Powell, are you able to vote online?
Yeah, I'm a little bit behind because I forgot I had to log out of the policy committee meeting and into the next meeting.
Would you like me to capture the vote for you?
Yes, please.
And it is yes?
Just this, yeah, just this once, yes.
Great, thank you. Motion carried 6-0. Motion carries 6-0.
All right, moving on. We are going to executive session, which is closed to the public, to discuss matters leading to the appointment of a particular person or corporation, or to discuss matters of concern with the General Counsel as permitted by Section 105 of the Open Meetings Law. Can I have a motion to go into executive
So moved.
session?
Second.
I think by President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. All right.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it.
6:27. I will record the vote.
Thank you. Good evening once again. We're back from executive session. Once again, I am James Patterson. I chair the Audit Committee. The next item we're going into, let's see. We need to consider Resolution 495 for suspension appeals. Can I have a motion for Resolution 495?
Second?
President Elliott and seconded by Commissioner Malloy. Any comments or questions? Again, are we verbal or
Both?
both? Can I have a verbal vote?
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. And online voting is available. Commissioner Powell, are you able to vote?
I think so.
Does she have to be on screen when she votes? Does she come
Got to be on screen, Commissioner.
Okay, just so that you know, when I go to Board Docs on my tablet, it automatically does stop video. So I was looking for the screen to vote, and that's why I went off camera.
All right.
May I record the vote for you?
Please do. That would be a yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Motion? Carry 6-0?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving forward, resolution for consideration for B. Can I have a motion to waive the 48-hour submission rules
So moved.
Second?
by President Elliott and seconded by Commissioner Malloy, if I'm correct?
Yep.
Any comments or questions? Can I have a verbal vote?
Yes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it.
Commissioner Powell, I did not hear your vote.
That's a yes,
Would
and
you
I
like-
did find,
And
I can do
record-
that.
Oh, okay.
Online voting is available.
Beatrice, is it up for you? President? Okay. Great. I have everyone?
All set?
Yes, motion carries 6-0.
All right, moving forward, item C, we need to consider Resolution 496 for an acting principal appointment.
Oh, I need
Did
to
you-
make that public. 1 moment, please. Uh-oh.
All set, Nissa?
1 moment, please. Having a little bit of trouble. There we go.
Ready?
You ready on this, sir?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that that motion's public so that everyone can see it. I'm back in the meeting. Thank you.
Motion?
Was that Commissioner Malloy?
Yes.
Second.
Elliott, thank you. Can we have a verbal vote?
Can we have a verbal vote? This is on 496?
Yes, please.
For Resolution 496, can we have a verbal vote?
Yes.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Any questions or comments? I don't know if I said that. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm waiting on
Okay.
Powell and Patterson's votes.
Commissioner,
Commissioner,
I'm done. Yep.
no. Amy has has some comments.
Has a comment? Commissioner Malloy?
Just wanted to congratulate Akila, Principal Collins. Welcome, and looking forward to welcoming you back. Well, you're already there at 34, but welcome to your new role. Congratulations.
Any other commissioners or president, vice president have any comments?
No.
All right. We're on to Item number 5, the Audit Committee discussion items. The Auditor General will facilitate discussion items from this point.
Okay, we have 3 reports. They're not very new or very different information. We have 2 student activity fund audits, one at the Monroe High School and the second at Franklin High School. As it relates, we'll just briefly speak about James Monroe High School. First of all, we really saw that the leadership really tried to comply with the requirements. That's almost uncommon. They really did a good job. This was actually one of the better ones. There were 7 recommendations. We really have to improve just some compliance items using standard forms, fundraising, deposits, those types of things. But this was one of the better performances we've seen. We've met with the school. They're making those improvements. But that is what James Monroe actually had in that school. The second being Franklin Upper School. It's there were 14 recommendations. All of the same items identified at Monroe did take place. In addition, establishing and renewal funds and that type of information. Once I start talking, I stop sliding through, which is not good. But generally speaking, and the documents will be, if the board approves, they will be posted publicly. The wellness policy compliance to make sure that we're not selling items that are not healthy during lunch hours, because that would jeopardize our USDA status, so we know that that's an important thing as well. Looking at inventory records, and the last being a year-end close. As it relates to the topic of student activity funds, if you recall, there was a external audit comment this past year as it related to student activity funds, and that is generally the comment we end up with every year. But in the comment this year, one thing is we really wanted to push to do a little bit better and improve the outcomes. So we've been working with CFO Farr's team, and we've actually done much more pushing for automation, which lines up with kind of what things are going on nowadays, really digital, putting things in more digital forms instead of having papers in the schools, et cetera. We do expect in this audit plan, and which I'll talk to last about, we're going to be doing some work in that team, with that team, to see how have we made things digital, how have we put things so there's visibility in our accounting department. That way, throughout the year, we're going to be monitoring it, because we really are pushing to actually get an unqualified opinion in this area. Very difficult, but we figured we'd set a higher bar. And so that is what we're going to be working on. So it is a little bit of work from the school standpoint of documenting and storing the documents, but it does save us, because what happens at the end of the year is that the secretaries or the club advisors leave, or they might transition or retire, and we have no records. And then the auditors come in at the end of the year, and we're like, where's the stuff? And so that is one of the challenges we've had historically. It started with when we were actually during COVID trying to do the external audit. I had realized, okay, how are we going to get through this audit and this last portion, the student activity? And so during that period, I had actually asked the accounting leadership, ask for all the documents before this year lets out. And so we really pulled, and it was one of the better years we had. So where we're at right now is we've included online training, we've included online doc storage and things such as that. So we really are hoping that we're going to end up in a better place than we have, especially considering we have new external auditors. So it's going to be a fresh look at this content. But we really think we're doing much better job. So hats off to Carrie Couples and Bob Quetchen in CFO Farr's shop, where they're doing a bunch of work with that. The last item is a follow-up report, so it's information for the most part that you've already seen. A number of the items in the professional service contracts follow-up report you've seen already, and many things are partially complete or completed. So there's been a lot of great work that is happening both, and the 2 main departments for this would be General Counsel Neal's organization as well as CFO Farr's in the purchasing area. And so they have been working. There's some things partially complete. There's still a few items that we really need to nail down. One of the items that the board should be aware of course, we have some requirements as it relates to complying with procurement practices, which includes obtaining contracts as required. Oops, actually, can you go back to the last doc for me, please? Sorry, thank you. So contract requirements, et cetera. The only thing I do want to bring to your attention is in this report, while there was a lot of work that was happening, we did actually end up adding 5 new recommendations to the follow-up. We generally try not to do that, and because my old eyes are having some sort of challenge trying to see that small screen down there, I'm trying to get to recommendation 17, and I think it's 14. I'm close? Okay. Yeah, that's just not, you're going to have to put a wall size for me to be able to see that one. So, but actually, I just want to bring to your attention the additional recommendations that are there and the specific concerns as it relates to those, because that would be new content. Really trying to work on cycle time. We recognize the entire cycle time is not 100% in general counsel's shop. There are things that are happening that are outside of their control, so it's kind of like payroll. Someone doesn't get paid, it's payroll's fault, but then lots of things might have happened upstream that was not their fault. So as we look at the cycle time, there have been concerns as it relates to how long it takes to get a process done and get through the contract process, et cetera. And so we're really looking to look at the process, try to streamline the process, take out some redundancies, et cetera, and really look at how can we make that cycle time shorter. So that part is important. Also, which has to be considered is, you know, even though contracts at this point are required for professional services over 2,000, it may come to the board, it depends upon the work that's done inside of the legal department, but is that the right number, you know? Okay, we already got a no. So there might be some hope as far as how much needs to be done, but that is another question. And then we have a third thing that comes up that is going to be under separate cover, which is about what we call confirming orders. You should have gone through the process, you should have gotten a contract, you should have gone through the purchase order process, et cetera, but you didn't do any of the things you were supposed to. So we have this process that we call confirming order, where we put it in a system and we didn't follow the proper protocols, and yet there is a approval process to actually get those items paid. And one of the concerns, and the reason why I'm going to come back to you under separate cover, is this is basically non-compliance. We have to do better. And so we really want to see what escalation needs to happen, how are we going to tighten that process, because technically that is an internal control weakness when we're not compliant and we're not affecting change in that area. That was just a plug. It touched the professional service contract area, so I wanted to bring that up. Other things that we actually want to make sure we have is determining, as you've already mentioned, there's dollar thresholds as far as you may not need contracts for everything 2,000 and over, but there's also then the opportunity, what do you expect or how much content and what is the process for smaller value contracts versus larger dollar value contracts. So that was one. And then the next one is about approvals. The contracts department was working really hard to try to draft agreements for basically everyone in the organization. They can't possibly be an expert on all the topics. So what's important is users are supposed to then provide content to their department to help them draft a proper contract. What was happening previously is, and one of the challenges we had was that they didn't get all of the information they required. So a new process was established, which we call a sure sign, which is probably requiring all of the documentation in the system. The challenge with that is it's not the fastest process, and we have to figure out how to make things better while giving them what they need to do their job. So I just wanted to put that one out there. The last two items I did want to mention, one is the Oracle evaluation. We've noticed the contracts department has purchased or utilized other tools to help make them as proficient as possible. And for my 2-minute shout out, I've got to say, the group itself is one of the strongest I've seen in the time that I've been here. So it's not about their ability or their skill. I think the challenge becomes, how do we get the process to work with us, how to have systems support us, and how to have the information we really do require. So as it relates to that, there is something called High Q that they have to kind of help their administration of contracts. There's also this Assure sign to help with the documentation and the support to come up with contracts and make sure there's agreement and approval. So as we look at some of these tools, we are paying for Oracle, which is considerable money. We really want to make sure that it's within scope and possible for them to get their needs met as a functional unit of the organization, especially considering how important they are. So that, too, is one of the recommendations, just to make sure we're seeing where the system's going to support us and do what we need, so we don't have a lot of side systems supporting a unit. And the last is just to ensure that our purchase orders are dated with our executed agreements. So ideally, we want to make sure all of the dates are right and we're not initiating services before we have an active contract. So that actually concludes the professional service follow-up report. Commissioner Patterson? Oh.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Let's see. I have a motion to accept the Monroe Student Activity Funds report, the Franklin SAF report, and the Professional Service Contracts Audit report, audit follow-up report.
Motion?
Second?
Motion by Vice President LeBron, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. Any comments or questions?
I do, actually.
Vice President LeBron?
I just wanted to, in terms of the professional, with the contracts and stuff, I just want to put in a request that we create a procedure in advance for fast-tracking something in case there's an emergency. So yes, understanding that this is the process for everything else, but if there's an emergency that comes up and we need to be able to quickly have a contract with someone, that we embed that and create that process and embed it now, while we're having the conversation of revamping this. Only because I know we've encountered this, and we put these processes in place so that we dot our I's and cross our T's, and I support that. But we have to create a fast track for these one-off or emergencies type of situations that may come up. And that way, all staff are also informed and trained on it, with the parameters of understanding that just because you didn't do your confirming order, your purchase order in advance, and get the signatures, that doesn't make that an emergency. I mean more like a situation happened at a school and we want to quickly contract with an outside group to help us address a need next week. That's what I mean. So I just want to be clear about that, because I do not want to support that folks didn't follow the process and had plenty of time to do so, and then have this little out to use a fast-track approach. So I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
I'm sorry, just one.
comments by the superintendent?
So council and I have absolutely had that discussion. The signature process is really also a protection for the superintendent, right? So we've had some conversation regarding how do we, in those rare situations, that isn't someone's poor planning as a response, right? How we could fast track some things. And I believe we did that with RPD when we did that. So it was a fast track, it was my signature versus going through the whole situation. The thing with the Shore sign, it's our system we have right now. We have to make sure that we keep on track of people. And we talked a little bit about this at Cabinet today as well, of making sure that we're following up on a process. Legal has sometimes been, and I think we just heard that the contract hasn't been all signed yet before it even got to them to review. So people enter it, and it hasn't had all the check marks yet, and they believe the contract processes start. Legal doesn't start reviewing it until all of those signatures, all of those things are in place. Then their clock starts ticking. So it is a systems concern as well, but we have had some conversations about expediting important contracts or emergency contracts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner LeBron. I want to say thank you for the Auditor General. Sometimes we have to look at the way we do things and always get better. So I take it to heart and fully support what the superintendent had to say. We do have some processes in place for some emergency things, but as you highlighted, we got to be careful that everything doesn't become an emergency, right? Because that could happen. So thank you very much, and we will absolutely work on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by any other board member? President Elliott?
Okay.
Let me go to the president, and then we'll come to you, Commissioner.
So with regard to the Franklin upper account, when are you going back to revisit to see if there have been corrections made?
So the SAF team has just recently done a training to see that work. So it'll probably be a few months before. At year-end, all of their documentation comes in, which allows us to do an extra check-in. And our desire is to make things a little bit better. So when our external auditors come in, we don't know what they're going to select as buildings. So some of those buildings, we're going to wait and see which ones they're going to It's kind of funny because I was speaking to the principal of Soda, and I don't care what season you're in, Soda always gets picked because they have so much money because of the dramas, and it's just kind of funny because it's like, are you guys auditing us again? Because it just keeps happening, but we don't know what the external auditor is going to choose, and then subject to those that they go back in and do another audit on, we'll have that content, and all the documentation will be available for the summer.
Yeah, but Madam Auditor General, whether the external auditors come in or not, you know, we need to make sure that we are doing, that school is managing the money effectively. And so, you know, word needs to get back that they've got to get better with this.
So at our closing, we actually went through the details of what they need to do, how they need to do it. We just want to give them a little bit of time to do that.
Understood.
And then in June, all their documents will be online, so we're able to see that and touch back with them over like the summer.
Yeah, they need to just be clear that the board is watching these funds. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's go on to Commissioner Powell. First of all, let me apologize. Sometimes when you're on Zoom, I just almost forget you're there, so I apologize for you and Dr. Jello for that.
No, I get that. I've lived through it. So I have a process question before I make my observation. This is discussed, we still have a motion to vote on, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So my observation is, it seems to me that with the professional services contract and in particular handling exceptions when it hasn't gone through the proper process, is there a system in place where weekly, monthly, whatever, quarterly, we look at those transactions that didn't follow the process, identify which ones were genuine emergencies, and whether we need to have maybe some contingency contracts in place for similar emergencies? But also, at the end of that week, month, or quarter, to see whether some professional development training needs to happen or retraining. And if training and retraining has happened and the problems are still occurring, whether that doesn't rise to the level of being something needs to hit somebody's performance evaluation. And I'd just like to hear this from the superintendent on that.
So we get confirming order reports to the executive cabinet to follow up on with the direct reports to their supervisor. So yes, right now I am also recently have put in a process that any confirming order that comes in from me needs to be a memo to the superintendent as to why it is coming in and why it needs to be approved. So we do have processes in place. I do agree confirming orders was something that probably a few years ago was you know, drilled a little bit harder in terms of, remember, this is what it is. We have to revisit that as well, just to make sure that that is not, this doesn't become the norm. There are exceptions in terms of how we get billed that impact us in terms of conforming orders that we have to do, tuitions for schools, such of those situations. So some of them are natural, but others, we are absolutely having a conversation as executive leaders and the senior leadership team to say, what is it to make sure that these don't happen any further?
Oh, you raise a really good point about those events that are natural, like you just said, where it's perhaps impossible to get the approval ahead of time. Maybe impossible is too strong a word, but you use the example of tuition payments or is there a way that we can lay out a clear process for those exceptions that happen frequently enough that they're not an exception, that they deserve their own process?
I think that's a conversation I could absolutely have with the chief financial officer to see how we could look at that, absolutely.
I would like to add to that, actually. So there is a specific list of what we call direct payments, and those would be things that are like, you can't exactly estimate the utility costs because those goes up and down, different types of things. So that list actually comes out of accounting, and that is processed. So as the board's claims auditor goes through, they're checking disbursements against that direct payment list, saying, okay, yeah, this makes sense, versus things that are reported to you as confirming orders. So those are two different venues that do exist. Specific, and the reason why I'm actually doing this work is that while there is a weekly report that comes out and identifies them, it's just not clear how the escalation is working, et cetera, and we want to give the superintendent an opportunity to say, now with this new administration, how are we handling this? Is this going to be something that we're going to, make it smaller? So that does take place because we don't want it to be an alternate pathway, especially when it doesn't have a similar group of controls. So you'll see that in the next cycle or within the next couple of meetings, that we are going to do some work in that area because I think we really need to specify what types of things are coming, trends, really understand what those payments are looking like and what the exposure potentially is on those types of payments.
And I'll just add, there are some emergency, kind of procedures in place. And the example I like to use, so I think somebody asked about training, and we do a contract training for every department, essentially in the district that does contracts every year. The team is actually doing that right now. And the example I like to use in those trainings, when I used to do them personally myself, is say we have the storm of the century, and facilities has every vendor that they have a contract with, they can't plow fast enough, or there's not enough trucks to get folks clear. We need the place clear so people can get in and out of school buildings and things like that. That's a legitimate emergency that you couldn't potentially foresee. And there are certain procedures in place, and then I've had to respond to questions and inquiries like that. Again, the real work is, again, identifying, again, what's a real emergency and what isn't, right?
Okay, any other questions or comments from any board members? All right, I just like to add one thing. When I was reviewing, the meeting and the agenda and things like that, what I did see is what was brought to my attention is the Oracle project. So in an effort to save time, I put these questions in the question log. What is the current status of the Oracle project? What is the current timetable? How much money has been spent on the Oracle project to date? And what is the total projected spending on the project? So they're just questions that the administration at some point in time, if you could respond to in the question log, for time's sake, we don't have to go into it now.
Absolutely, we'll get those responses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. So we're going to take a vote on this?
Yes. I think there was a motion to accept the reports.
Yes, it was. I need a verbal vote. Thank
Can we
you.
have a verbal vote, please? Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. Okay.
Online voting is open.
Uh-oh. There it is.
Has it
Yeah,
popped
mine
up
didn't
for
come
anyone
up.
else? Hasn't popped
But
up for
maybe
me.
it did.
I have all the votes except for Commissioner Powell right now.
You got my vote?
It's
Okay.
in here.
All right.
I'm just waiting on Commissioner Powell.
Sorry, for some reason, my iPad can't manage to,
Pop up.
Would you like me to record the vote for you?
oh, I'm there. I got it. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, before we go forward, did Dr. Jello have any statements? I'm sorry, Dr. Jello.
No, I'm just happy to hear that you asked and requested detailed information about the status of Oracle. I would only add if we could include the information that Anissa mentioned about the connection or lack thereof between the legal department and the processes that they use and how that's going to be integrated into Oracle or not.
In case there was a lack of clarity, did everyone understand what she's looking? So she was referring to ensuring that our needs are met through the Oracle system? I didn't know.
With the contract process, we got it.
Absolutely. I saw some faces and I wasn't sure if everyone got
I
it.
got it.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo, for that support.
Thank you, Anissa. I appreciate the interpretation. Thanks.
Okay, the next thing we were actually going to go through is I wanted to walk through the plan. We were looking at the work plan, and I just wanted to walk through that process. Dijon, can you help me? Great. I got to get with this clicker, and we don't get along that well. We really don't. So let's see if I can get back. Okay. So the intent and our mission is to really support and assist the Board of Education with their oversight responsibilities. I'm not going to read to all of you. We really want to improve and strengthen internal controls and make sure that we issue recommendations to safeguard assets, maintain integrity in our transactions, assess compliance, and evaluate risks with processes. As it relates to that work, there were a number of sources of information we used. We did have interviews with district leaders. We looked at prior concerns. We actually go through an audit controls testing where we go through various transactions and test the controls for certain transactions. We look at OAG audit projects and different things that come up throughout the year. We look at the budget and understand the spend in a particular functional area, the regulatory requirements, industry trends, and state comptroller audit topics, because that usually tells us at a theater near you they're showing up and going to ask about some of those things. So we want to make sure we have an awareness. As it relates to that with the risk evaluation criteria, we really want to try to compare our significance versus the likelihood of something going wrong. From a significance standpoint, we're looking at the impact on education, because at the end of the day, that better be most important to everyone. Public interest, public is including parents, families, community, the interests and the concerns, making sure we know the financial significance or materiality for an item, as well as the risk of regulatory penalty in a particular area. Comes to mind things like special ed and things such as that. When we look at the likelihood of a problem taking place or risk in an area, we're thinking about fraud risk. So that's like an area like cash, where you know that there's certainly an opportunity there. Management and board concerns as evidenced by meetings, contents, goals, objectives, et cetera. Complexity of operation and management, board policies, regulations, and protocols. We really want to just step back, and I just want to bring to your attention, there's still those COVID implications lingering. It's not a done situation, but those main components that really affected us during kind of the high COVID season still are prevalent right now. We're looking at student achievement challenges. We did have this challenge prior to COVID. It probably had a bigger gap during the COVID period. It's still a concern today. We're looking at staffing shortages. It's in all areas. It's in audit, but most importantly, it's our teachers, it's our support services in schools, et cetera. And so that's a challenge that continues to exist. The technology attacks, because we're gone back to a more digital world because people were home more often, now we have to deal with the cybersecurity, network security, and those types of issues, as well as the stimulus funding. While it did close a gap and help us through a season, now we're coming on that season where that money is about to dry up, and now we have new challenges as we're trying to figure out what's next. When we look at industry and OSC-related concerns, and I combine those together, again, cybersecurity is at the top of the list. There have been different things that have happened, even at the district, where they try to see if our controls are solid, and they'll have, they'll mask a leader and say, hey, you know, this is the superintendent. I need a check sent out today for this amount. That has happened at various districts. We've even had an incident where there was a request for a check a couple years ago, and it was kind of an interesting thing where you're like, are they for real? This doesn't seem right. And we want to make sure that our systems are strong enough to say, oh no, that's not how we do business here. That's not going to happen. We want to look at data security and making sure that there's not unauthorized access for our content. Talent management, being able to ensure we can get the staff that we need in the various areas with the right skills and qualifications so we can meet our organizational goals. We've got a third-party reliance that's going on. We really are, when you start having talent issues, you start outsourcing pieces because you can't meet that need internally. So then you have to deal with your data going to the third party. How are you securing the risk in that organization, in that area, as well as the challenge of when you don't have that third party any longer, now you have the information and that knowledge and skill set. If you don't pay for it, you don't have it anymore. So how do we then make sure that we have those concerns met when we use a third party? How are we making sure that that transfer of knowledge and information is coming back to us so that we can be successful when we don't continue those contracts? Digitization, when we're looking at it, we're definitely not going to have, similar to what we're doing in SAF, we can't have all the schools with stacks of paper and boxes of papers with all of their records. We're expecting them to be scanned online, available to everyone. So when they're not at the school in the summertime, we still can get the records. That happens across all areas. When we talk about financial management and fund balance, kind of goes to the fact that we know the money is going to be lighter due to the COVID money and all of the stimulus funds we got. So now we're sitting there and noticing that there's a trend that the OSC is looking at fund balance, financial management, those types of things, to try to really understand the condition of organizations as we're going into this next season. Mental health is a big topic. It's became really probably, it was a big topic previously, and I think through COVID, we really saw how much more important that one came up when the kids came back from school. I'm really excited that we have Ruth Turner back here with that being a champion in that particular area, because at the end of the day, we know that that's a real, she's going to champion that cause for our kids, and that's awesome. And the last being procurement. I think the procurement need, when I look at it and I think about it, I really think it has to do with the amount of influx of dollars coming through. So now you're going to have more attention on buying and procurement type practices because we had millions and millions of dollars. So now what's that practice, and is it secure enough? When we look at the interviews and conversations, the top concerns that came up, teaching and learning, well, it should be because that's kind of our business. Special education came up as a big topic. Human resources, of course, we need, these things all go hand in hand, right? You need people to do these things. Oracle implementation actually really was a high item because everyone's talking about it. There's so much change coming, and I think it comes with concern. The district reconfiguration and right sizing is also a concern. We know we've been talking about, you know, what is the structure going to be for our buildings? What buildings are we going to maintain? Which ones are we going to change? How that's going to shift? That is a concern. Contracts actually came up because there are concerns around the contract process. The good news is we just finished some work there, and Adrian and his team are really working well to try to deal with some of those issues, and some of these newer recommendations are really going to look at that cycle time so people know what to expect. Building safety. At this week, just across the nation, that's a challenge, and we really want to make sure that there's that focus. That's what came out. That's really an important topic. And the last being revenue assurance and ARP runoff. I combined those two as I did this work, and the main reason for that is simply we need to start really looking at, you think about when you're running short on money, things you didn't look at before, you're like, oh, wait a minute, I think I could sell that. You're trying to make money when you start running out of money. So we're at this point where ARP is about to dry up, and we probably need to be a lot more diligent about what money's left on the table and go after it. So that are some of the top concerns. I know I quickly touched on it, but I just want to hit the top few quickly. As it relates to teaching and learning, really closing that learning gap, the lack of staff and supports to meet the student needs across the board on different particular ways, retention of qualified personnel, that comes up frequently, and the board frequently states how that's really important to maintain and to retain the people that are quality teachers who are really making a difference for kids. Financial equity across schools. When we start cutting things, everyone gets concerned about how are these cuts going to affect buildings, and are all buildings going to be able to, in an equitable way, deal with and have programs that are supportive of kids, and the social emotional needs. Those are the things that generally came up with teaching and learning. Under special education, obviously there's a lot of work with the consent decree, so it's really important that, you know, there's certain concerns as it relates to tracking and the things we have to do because of what was negotiated, with being responsive to the student needs, and there's always concerns about the responsiveness. Suspensions still occur with our students with disabilities, and we really want to make sure that we're really looking at that. While the process has improved to have a manifestation after a suspension, which is great to identify if there is an actual, if the suspension was due to a manifestation, but to ensure that we're not in a place where we're heavily suspending our students with disabilities, that's important. And actually, I promised the various individuals I spoke to, but I had a lot of very interesting one-liners that came out of some of the conversations. And the most interesting about this particular topic, and I won't say who, but if you see a face, so be it, but the person actually made the comment that, you know, we've taken poverty and it's become a disability. And it's interesting how you're looking at it, and it's how we function here, but that's not okay. Staff turnover and hiring shortages is a challenge in special ed for classes, teachers, supports, and process efficiencies being needed to make sure that we're all working cohesively in the general education side of the business as well as the special ed, so we should all be together on that. Human resources came up, And we're excited about doing this work. And actually, to the credit of Dr. Miller, he actually is always open to saying, yes, you know what, we've experienced some challenges. We really do want to have audit to take place. So as it relates to that, it's a critical function. We have a HR staff turnover problem where there's just been a lot of churn in there, which really makes it difficult to stabilize how things are supposed to function when you can't keep qualified people in the shop. We also have the district turnover and hiring shortages that are happening in a number of areas. The response times for hiring and discipline and things are difficult. And that is one of the concerns expressed. General data integrity, that's what you're entering. That's, you know, dates and lots of data. HR is data-driven, and we just want to make sure that the integrity is in that process. The lack of substitutes that are needed in a number of areas. Compensation equity, that's a big thing the board has taken on, and that's really important. And our systems and practices being able to support us. Did you have a question?
I did, but I'll wait.
Okay. Next is the Oracle implementation. I know that there have been, a lot of people came forward with concerns around Oracle. I think it's a scary time because it's a big change. There is the workload for current staff, so they're trying to maintain their daily responsibilities as well as now they're trying to deal with lots and lots of meetings throughout the day, and that has caused challenges for people. The requirements, the resources required to implement this very large enterprise-wide system has been a big thing. Our significant use of consultants in response to the large need to actually implement, we have consultants coming in and helping us and trying to support daily operations. Our implementation methodology, the desire to use this cloud-based system and try not to keep customizing things so that we can go forward and always have a maintained system, but that's challenging to the organization because we're known for needing customization, let me just say. The cost of implementation, it is a very large and significant cost system, and there's just a general lack of confidence because there's so much change going on. Of course, I spoke a little bit about the reconfiguration and right sizing and the concerns in that area. Contracts, we talked about a little bit earlier, so we won't. Building safety, it's pretty important to make sure that while we are compliant with things such as the district safety team, the plans, the blurps, all of these various things, building level emergency response plan, don't want to use acronyms that folks don't know. So it's those types of things that we have and we're compliant, we can check the box. But the question comes, and the important part is not if we can check the box, but do we know what to do when something happens? And so I really want to take a look at building safety from that standpoint because it gets real sobering when you have all of these great plans, but it's not operationalized. You have all of this information is how are the babies safe? At the end of the day, we need to make sure, does everyone know what to do? Do we have skilled and qualified people to handle some of these issues? So that's where building safety comes in. And again, as I mentioned, revenue assurance is finding that money that we probably didn't go after aggressively or could more aggressively go after some things. Where are they? Because we're going to end up needing it. So the last are the general areas that are planned for the audit plan. Obviously, it's more than we can do. We're hoping that we have a creative solution through ARP funding in this next year. We actually have an opportunity, and what I'm hoping to do this year is identify a resource because we haven't found the temporary staff member to stand in for the job. So we'll use a third-party firm but scope it ourselves to make sure we can do a little bit more work. But special education, of course, being important, dealing with compliance aspects, human resource administration, understanding of the hiring process and data integrity, the Oracle implementation, really making sure the control environment that we have to build in this system is one that we can support and how it will align with what our operational processes are. I just mentioned building safety, the revenue assurance. I also mentioned transportation's a recent area that has come up with a few challenges more recently because it's such it's been running better than it has in the past as far as it's been silent. We haven't heard as many challenges, but there's a lot of different vendors providing services. We have internal resources, we have external resources. We want to just do a controls review. It's been a few years since we've been in that area, so we want to make sure that that one is a cycle review we have to do. Number 7 being attendance, critical to where we are operating. First of all, if the kids aren't in school, they're not learning. So we want to make sure that this attendance function, if we think about what's critical to how we function, we need to make sure that attendance, the team, that we have a central team as well as what's happening in the schools, really has a comprehensive approach to ensuring that we're tracking, we're monitoring, we're getting the kids in school and we're on top of those things. Naturally, we'll do an annual financial audit. We're having a new auditor this year. As you recall, Freed Maxick has completed their 5th year, so we're going to be with Drescher and Malecki will be our new auditors, and they will be coming in to do that work. Actually, at our next audit committee meeting, they will likely have the external audit plan for us. Student activity counts is something that we continue to do and will. We're going to be looking at administration in addition to follow-up audits and special projects. The last thing before I get to you, Commissioner Malloy, inside of special projects and requests, there is a lingering athletic audit that has to be done or scoped as it relates to the monitor's plan. That needs to be looked at. There's also some special procedures in purchasing that needed to be done. So we just wanted to address those things. Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you. Yeah, this was just something you said regarding the revenue assurance. I'm wondering, I know that we cut quite a few people from our grants department back in 2019. Is that a source of potential revenue, is increasing our grant writers?
That would actually be a decision, Superintendent?
So right now, I think our grants department is pretty well
Okay, it's
equipped and well
robust again.
staffed.
Okay.
But, you know, their function right now has been to monitor and make sure grants are being spent down and that we have plans for grants. You know, they're not actively pursuing grants because of the amount of money we have coming in through ARP and Cursor. But, you know, as that trails off, there'll be more of a need for them to actively pursue and secure grants.
Did we have at one time layoffs in that department? know
I
back in
would have to
2019
go back and check. Let me find out more
Okay.
information on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions by any other board members? Vice President LeBrun?
I have a couple of questions, but also I'm going to start with a request for the audit from the Council of Great City Schools that they did on HR when the previous superintendent is here. We have yet to see that. It's my understanding that the district paid for that from the previous superintendent. She brought them in. We even pay for these people to physically fly here to do this audit. We never saw the report. I just want to put it out there. But I also am making the request that the board sees it and that our auditor sees it, just to kind of align, so you're not double. I feel like they already did an audit there. At this point, I'm curious about what they found and how you can then look at what processes in place or lack of processes we can be working on versus putting it as part of your audit, because again, we already paid someone to do that. The customizations, I do want to just uplift the insanity of customization in this district with the software that we use. So the fact that we have so many customizations, there's literally no way to kind of ever merge those outdated systems anyway. But the fact that each department over time was allowed to, you know, for example, hey, I need a new tab on my screen, and then that is collecting the data, but it's not connected to the other department or a central process. So I, for one, understand that the Oracle lift is going to be hard. Again, I survived a merger of two big health systems in Rochester who use historically different health records and employee records and had to figure out one system to use and merge into. And it is painful. And it is even more painful when the administration, I have to just put this out here, not to this administration, doesn't have a good rollout plan. And I have brought this out and have mentioned this. The rollout has to include constant reminders, training opportunities, virtual training, in-person training, because everybody does not learn virtually and can. It's just, we all have different learning styles, just like students. We become adults with different learning styles too. So I just want to put that out there. And then the attendance. I do want to put in I guess a plug for right now, or plant this seed, that as we move forward, I have to say it's really unrealistic to expect that our counselors and our social workers, quite frankly, even our principals, and let me just be clear, I'm not saying that they should not be working as a team to discuss students who have high missed attendance. But then they're all expected to then track those families down. And I just have to say, I find it actually quite a mismatch, if you will. And I would like us to explore partnering with a community-based organization that can have a community health worker that comes in embedded into that team. They still do the process of tracking and having the conversations and identifying the students, but then that community health worker goes out and finds these families and addresses the need at the community level. So I just have to say that because I know that this is how we've always done it. It ain't working. And it's really burning out to it's a burnout to our staff when we expect them to do a million other things. I want my social workers in this district to provide social work to our students and have that be their main focus. I want our counselors to provide counseling and advisement and CTE and college career paths for our kids as their main function and be able to do that and not juggle a million other things that we really could be partnering. And I say that from lived shared experience. I was a community health worker, clinically based out of Genesee Internal Medicine, and with the same understanding that social worker is there, which is a billable service through a health service. So let me just say that. It's unrealistic to expect that that social worker at that clinic is going to go find the client and in the neighborhood, in their home, and see what's happening there and why they can't meet their medical goals. And it's the same concept in a school environment. It's not, in my opinion, appropriate or it's not right either. I just have to say that because at the end of the day, it's not our staff's fault, but our kids are the ones who suffer because that social worker can't be there in that moment when that child needs them because they're sitting in an attendance meeting and then they're trying to track down these families. So I just had to put that all out there on record. And I know that there are better, more efficient solutions to these issues that can create some win-wins for our communities and our families. Thank you.
President Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Couple of questions. One is, couple of questions and one comment. With regard to Commissioner, Vice President LeBron mentioned about the HR audit from Council of Great City Schools. If there are other audits that they've done, if you can provide those, if we can have those as well. And then a question about the grade reconfiguration. What's the status of that? Where are we with that audit?
Well, the grade configuration,
Not the
where-
grade, I'm sorry.
status?
I'm sorry. The grading, the grading.
Oh, grading
Yeah, I'm
policy.
sorry. Misspoke.
So I know that there are policies, I think Commissioner Powell could admit, I saw two policies, one around grading, and I think actually Superintendent Peluso probably can shed a little bit more light. I know there's transition, but I know I saw two policies.
So we're continuing the graduation work towards graduation audit, right? We're in executive cabinet today. We reviewed some grading policies as well as retention policies. So all those policies that are supposed to happen at the end of the year are coming forth, and we'll go through the process.
So we'll see by the end of the year a different kind of grading system, I guess is what I'm asking, that we have a different grading system than we had before.
So we will have different, yes, we'll have different weights for grading. So I want to, and we'll have numeric grades. We still have numeric grades, right? What was brought out through the graduation audit was that honors classes and AP classes and even local classes carried additional weight on them. So if you got a B in a quote-unquote local or regular class, it was an A, right? So there was weighting that was old in the system that hasn't been updated. That will be reflected in the grading policies that we're reviewing right now.
Okay.
But we will continue to do the follow-up work. Obviously, these recommendations have been included in the state monitor's plan as well. So we really do try to get ahead and keep in touch with the management team. We'll also take the time to make sure we touch bases with, since there was transition, to ensure that there is continuity for all of the work that has to happen in that area.
Yeah, because it's important that our kids are able to compete with anybody's kids in this world. And then just lastly, just a comment, as I look at the plans, where we've been in the plans for the audit committee, it just seems that we're going to have to be working differently. There's just no way around it. We have less staff, and there are just a lot of things that are going on in our world that require now that we work differently. We're not going to be able to depend on the way things have been done in the past. And we're embarking in a direction that, you know, it really is an X factor that we really don't know. And so there probably is going to be some discomfort in this process. And, but, you know, this is what we've got to work with. And we don't have a whole lot of choice, or for that matter, in the future, a lot of resources. And so I'm asking administration, I'm asking the school buildings that, you know, we look, as opposed to allow the discomfort to help us to create. I guess that's what I want to say. Because there is discomfort, and it's not comfortable. But how do we work in an area where it is discomfort and to bring out the best within this school community? So it is what it is. I mean, you know, we're doing the best that we can in terms of advocacy. But of course, again, we've got scarce resources. So how do we make it work? And part of you know, I used to be kind of frustrated with the district because you all got billions. I got $6 million at my organization, right? And so, you know, we're trying to make it work on $6 million, right? And so this is the role I've been in for 30 years or so, if you will. So we've got to maybe look at if you could work on $6 million as opposed to, you know, $1 billion, because that's where we got to go. We got to go in a different direction. And I look at it as being positive, believe it or not. I think we can have some positive things coming out of this. So thank you. That's all I got to say.
Okay, any other comments by any other board members? Dr. Jallo or Commissioner Powell? Okay, nothing.
Okay. This actually will go before the board at the business meeting in March. We're not going to ask for a vote tonight on that. So if you have any additional questions, I certainly be happy to respond to them up until the March business meeting.
All right. So if there's no further questions, that concludes the audit committee meeting of the whole. And the next audit committee meeting is May 2nd, 2023. And I'm going to ask that board members complete the survey. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
By Commissioner Malloy and seconded by President Elliott.
I just turned off my computer. I forgot
Okay,
about
I'll take the vote. 1 second.
No, I'm talking about the survey.
Oh, okay.
Did you get a motion, Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, we
Yes.
have a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? The ayes have it.
Yes, I did. I got everybody's vote. At the end, I'm happy to record it.
All right, let's
Thank
get
you
up
so
out of
much.
here. Oh, yeah.
10 o'clock, a little bit later.
Yes, 10 tomorrow.